6. Noting the time and the presence of a quorum, I hereby call this meeting of the Acton Finance Committee to order. And the first item of business this evening is a presentation from the CPC. Mr. Bill Alesbury, welcome. Come on up. You can sit, you may stand. That's all right. Hit the microphone, please, sir.
Assume, well, I don't know what level of familiarity you folks have with the project applications we have. I sent you an email, but not having heard anything back, I didn't know what to assume. So I'm ready to do a 15-minute flyby or deep dive into whatever.
I think that would be best.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so by way of a broad overview, during this year's CPC cycle, we started the year, or started this process with approximately $1.9 million worth of general funds to apply to projects. And by the mid-November application deadline, we'd received 15 separate applications with an aggregate request of $2.02 million. So right off the bat, we were happily with just a $100,000 gap. Sure. Okay, you can't hear me. Okay. But in the last week, this past week, we've received a 16th application, a special request regarding the Conan parcel, and for a request for a deadline waiver that accompanied it. So that's what this meeting tonight is about, to review that at the CPC. But it involves an additional $1 million drawdown, not from the current year funds as much as from the set-aside balance that I'll talk about in a minute. So with an initial shortfall of about $98,000, this is the smallest gap we've had in 4 years. In the preceding 3 years, we had gaps of $900,000 to $1.3 million for starting position. So this is a welcome change. So in total, the draft warrant article that was published earlier, the CPC is recommending 13 applications for full funding. And in fact, with the open space set aside, we actually put more in, knowing that there was a whole lot of activity anticipated in the open space side of the equation. So we kind of had the opportunity to put some incremental money beyond what was initially requested. We did also partially modify the funding level for one application, and that was the open space preservation plan. And 2 applications were not supported, the 468 Main Street and the West Acton Citizens Library ADA feasibility study. So I can go through each one of these. This is where I wasn't sure what level of detail you want to get into. I can focus in on the ones that we modified. I can summarize the ones that we basically accepted on, as applied.
If you'll quickly give me the dollar amount of the 13 that you've already decided to fully fund.
The total amount that we are fully fund, the amount that we are funding is, I got to put my glasses on for this, $1,935,847. That is how much. Sorry, that's the available funding. What we are providing funding for, or recommending funding for, is $1,927,000. So there's an $8,000 differential. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question. Did you want a subset of that?
Yeah, in the warrant, I've got $1,935,847 was available. We turn the page. Okay, just want to mark what goes where. Yeah, do you, would the Finance Committee like him to go through each item or just through large items, each item? I'm getting in each item. We'll go
Each
with
item?
each item, Mr. Alesbury.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just following along the sequence that's in the warrant article. The first one is the open space set-aside fund addition. They applied for $600,000, and we were able after, and this was actually the last category that we decided upon, and it was after we went through a critical review of all the individual projects based on their own merits and evaluated what our sentiments were and what our collective opinions were regarding the overall funding request. What we had left over, principally, we will coalesced around the notion of putting the majority of it, not all of it, but the majority of what was left over into the open space set aside. So that was the one very different application that we were dealing with. In terms of the more conventional ones, the first one, the second one on the list is the Camp Acton road regrading. This is a simple matter of taking about 1,000-foot section of Camp Acton. It's an access road, leads into Camp Acton, and it's got, I can read to you what's in the warrant article, but it was a pretty straightforward request for.
I've driven down that road. It's okay. That's money well spent.
Yes. That seems to be the general opinion that we've heard. And $15,000 didn't seem like a massive amount, so we didn't spend a lot of time debating whether that was worthy or not. The second one was the Woodlawn Cemetery Chapel, which was more complicated given the fact that there was a far more substantial application that was presented a year ago that was turned down for a variety of reasons. But it had three major elements to it. It was the accessibility entranceway, it was the ADA bathroom, and it was the sound mitigation and lighting changes inside, as well as relocation of the organ in the chapel. And it was not funded. But this year they came back, and the Cemetery Commission had a completely different position about it. And the leverage of the cemetery, of the trust fund that is devoted to the chapel itself, has stepped forward and agreed to not just a partial funding, but a complete funding of the construction phase of this. So what they are asking for and what we have approved is $47,000 for ADA design features and assessments for the entryway. But the work, the construction, and all subsequent elements would be done funded by the Cemetery Commission. So we thought that was a very good. And the Cemetery Commission came and spoke at the presentation at CPC, and it was very well received, and so it was pretty easy to support this application.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
The article says due to accessibility concerns, it has remained closed since 2016. So because it wasn't accessible for ADA reasons, et cetera, like you literally couldn't host events there, et cetera?
Right. It has not been used for years.
Okay. And then the $47,000, is there a reason the cemetery can't fund that currently, or if it needs to go through the CPC?
I'm sorry, your question was?
I thought I heard you say that the money afterwards, the construction would be funded by the cemetery.
They came to the CPC requesting for no construction funding, but just simply funding for the.
But they can't fund this part of it?
That's not the way they approached CPC. They made a request, and we, after the previous year's experience, felt that this was a good compromise.
Okay. And, I
can't say for sure whether they, this, certainly the trust fund's not going to be drained to zero as a result of the construction work. So I think the answer.
I mean, the construction is going to be a much bigger number naturally, so the fund
absolutely.
is probably in okay to good shape.
Right.
Is just my read on that. And if I could just ask on the set aside, I'm curious, I forget in prior years, but is this just a general fund balance? And so the CPC decides that if it's 600,000 or 775,000, that money is just put into general fund to be allocated according to the CPC?
No.
Okay.
Are you talking about open space now?
Open space, yes.
Yeah. No, that's a dedicated open space set-aside fund. And once the money is put into that fund, it is exclusively for the use of open space purchases.
No, I understand that. I guess I'm asking is, are there, in past warrant article requests, have there been specific line items to say, we want an open space funding for X, Y, or Z, rather than just a general funding of the fund?
When you say X, Y, or Z, you mean project specifics?
Yeah, open space projects exclusively.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's usually a hostage of the calendar. This is the first time I'm aware of, in the number of years I've been on the committee, where the preparation for the town meeting has aligned with a developing project that can, in fact, they didn't make the November 15th or whatever the deadline was for the standard applications. They made a request, as they do every year, for a contribution to the open space set-aside fund to be deployed at a later date based on a particular specific application and opportunity to purchase land. At the same time, or shortly thereafter, but as of a week ago, we were presented with an application to draw down money for the purchase of the land and the Conan parcel. When the way it's happened in the past usually is the opportunity presents and develops, and it does not line up with the conventional town meeting calendar, and it usually is deferred into a special town meeting.
I see.
And it can be problematic because, sellers want to sell according to their calendar and their requirements, but this time around it seems to have aligned fairly conveniently, I would say. So there's an open space set-aside contribution, $775 to go in, that's our recommendation, and there is going to be a separate warrant article for $1,030,000 to come out for the express purpose of the purchase, or the purchase of a conservation restriction on the Conan parcel.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I think that answers my question, which was, are there specific line items typically set aside for open spaces? And I think in the past there were, but the way this is being handled now is to fund that purchase through town meeting with the 775 with the specific purchase in mind.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Bill, is it all right if we kind of question a couple of these as we go,
Yeah, sure.
if we come up with
By all
questions? So just to inform our two members who were at the Minuteman High School meeting and have just arrived, Bill has gotten as far as the first two items on their budget warrant, which is the 775 set aside and the three items: $15,000 Camp Acton Road improvements and $47,000 for the Woodlawn Cemetery. If you have any questions about those three, I guess we can do it now since we've paused at the moment. Mr. Borden.
Mine's more of a process comment on that. So, Dave, normally what happens a lot of times is they'll put money in the open space set aside, but that's mandated by CPC, by the CPA Act. You have to put X number of percentage, it was 10%, I believe, of your fund balance for that year. And then they will put the part of the article that is going to be, if they're going to be buying a chunk of land, it's going to be X number of dollars, however they do it, if you're taking the money all out at once or you're going to bond it. And they usually leave that as a separate part of the article so that the other one, because it's mandated and it won't, so each part of it stands on its own, so to speak. So that's more or less how the process will work. So you wouldn't want to say, oh, we can't put money in the CPC set aside, and you're still mandated by law to do at least 10%.
Well, in fact, the debt service, which is as predictable as the day is long, qualifies for the 10%.
Right. Oh, yeah, okay.
So in fact,
this year it's like, yeah.
well, I mean, for the last couple of years, it's been pretty close to that 10% amount. Not quite exactly, but most of the 10% is basically consumed by the debt service. That's not how we account for it, but that's how the state
looks at it. Right. So is the Conan property you're going to buy, is that going to be bonded or is that kind of?
No.
It's going to be cash?
It's going to be cash.
Okay.
Because it's only $1
Thank you.
million. We were, in the summer and late fall, led to believe that it might be a $2.5 million CPC request, which would have forced a combination of bonding and cash.
Thank you.
Mr. Cole?
I do have a question on the Woodlawn Cemetery Chapel.
Sure.
I read through it, and I fear I may have taken something for granted, so I just want to make sure I ask. I see that it says that it's been closed since 2016. This provides the ADA accessible entrance. Does that mean it will be open for business again once the external work is done, or do we still have to wait for internal work to occur as well?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not entirely sure because the bathroom is not ADA compliant as it currently stands. Certainly the other portion that relates to sound mitigation and lighting and the organ relocation is not pertinent to your question, but the bathroom may be. But my sense is that the Cemetery Commission is prepared, once the design work is completed, they are prepared to go forward with not just the front entryway, but the entire project.
But actually opening it back up.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Great.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
I didn't see that in the write-up.
no,
It's left dangling, and I went, okay, I must
That is
have
the
misread it.
objective, is to put it back into public use.
Thank you.
It's a great building.
Ms. Russell?
Hi, quick question.
Sure.
Do we have, if I remember correctly, this is a property that came up at last year's town meeting, and there was some concern from the family stakeholders.
Right.
I assume that they are happy?
And they are members of the Cemetery Commission as
Okay,
well.
excellent.
And they are
They're on board.
100% on board.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
Yes, made all the difference in the world.
All right, we can continue.
Okay. So the fourth one, well, E, Housing Authority, Acton Housing Authority. Sorry. Yeah, good catch. $87,000, 535, phase one of the conservation land culvert replacement. I'm not personally familiar with this land, but the concrete culvert that is there today is deteriorating and it's a risk of failure. And so that was something that we felt was worthy and supportable. The Acton Housing Authority, 362, 364 Main Street. This one was a little bit hard to initially understand the timing for it, because this is for the sustainability elements of the facility, which has yet to break ground, and so it entails solar panels and EV charging. And the reason for the timing here is that to do it efficiently and effectively, it needs to be designed in to the project before construction begins, which, once we got into some of the details on that, it seemed to be appropriate. But we spent a lot of time wringing our hands over this one, whether it was appropriate and should the full amount be applied. Unclear whether there's going to be some energy credits, but since the town of Acton is not a revenue generating or tax reporting entity, we may have to, there might be an opportunity, but it was not clear, and it's not included in this project, that the price tag could be mitigated somewhat ultimately by energy credits that would be created by the effort. And should that occur, that would be money coming back to the CPC. Okay. Open Space Preservation Plan. This was an interesting one. This is the one that we modified. It was a request for, there is about 10 parcels of land, conservation land, or land with conservation restrictions on it, that preceded the date for when certain features must be applied. And in order to properly protect, the features being the proper demarcation of the borders of the land, so that should there be an encroachment on the land, the town or the owner of the land with the conservation restriction, by virtue of the clear markings, would be in a stronger position to defend the integrity of the land. I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but that's basically what we understood. So there are 10 parcels, and they had a project sequencing that covered 5 years worth of activity. And they asked for all 5 years at the same time. And we said, well, that's great, but we're not in a position to fund anything for a 5-year set of specific projects. We'll take, it was not an even split from one year to the next. The years 3, 4, and 5 were back-end loaded with like Audubon Hill, which is a very substantial and complex piece of property, for 2025, Quail Ridge and Canoe Launch in 2026. But the Buxton and Harts parcels, W.R. Grace and 90 Martin Street, are earmarked for 2023 and 2024 for $45,800. And so we agreed to fund those 2 years and advise the applicant to come back in a year or 2 years' time for subsequent funding should the schedule that was laid out in this initial application still be pertinent. There was also a request for some equipment, a brush hog, about almost $5,000, and we just, in order for the conservation land and the meadowlands within it to be mowed occasionally, once a year, I guess. And that's a tough task today with the equipment that's currently in hand. But we spent a lot of time debating whether we should be funding equipment purchases for the town, and we decided no. So, next one, Narrow Bridge Boardwalk reconstruction. This one I am a little bit more familiar with personally. This was when I went out to inspect the bridge itself. I'm sure many of you are pretty well familiar with it, but it's a wreck. And the fact that it's still open for public, or at least it was a couple months ago, still open to public access was kind of surprising to me. This came in at about $300,000 initially, but there was a state earmark and some other funding that was gained pretty much concurrently to the application, or maybe a little bit before, but it was subsequently revised downward to the 155,000, I think. Sorry, I printed this out too small. 155,300. So we support it. We support that. Next one, Isaac Davis Monument. This one was real easy. The repairs for the Isaac Davis Monument right in the town center for $175,000. This was the second time in about 3 or 4 years that this project came forward, and it was for reasons I'm not sure I can speak to. It was removed from the application process, but it's been reinitiated, and we supported it conceptually anyway, and preliminarily a couple of years back, and we certainly continue to support it now. So we're 100% behind the $175,000 for the monument restoration. Not too dissimilarly, although it's not the same historic monument in the center of town, but the memorial library, the repointing of the chimney, the restoration. This was also something that we had brought before us a couple years back, and I think it was in conjunction with the Isaac Davis Monument, but I'm not entirely sure. But in any event, it came and then it disappeared and then it came back again, and the problem is still there. In fact, it's continuing to deteriorate. So we felt that was good use of CPC funds. I did forget to mention on the preceding one, the Isaac Davis Monument, we had, because of our 10% set-aside requirement from 2 or 3 years ago, was met with projects, one of which was canceled. I apologize. I don't recall the origins of which project and when the funds were awarded, but $88,000 came back to us, and it was part of the 10% set aside, so we could not put it into the general fund. It went into a historic resource set aside fund to be deployed on an appropriate project when it presents itself. It was attached to the case of Harlan property last year, and of course that has a history all of its own, so it was still on the books. So what we did was we decided to apply that $88,000 to the Isaac Davis Monument as well. So that kind of gave us $88,000 worth of increased funding for the year. So that goes on top of the $1,927,935. So, sorry for bouncing around a little bit, but that's so the chimney restoration on the library, we support it entirely. 18 Windsor Ave, exterior repairs and paint, $56,000. This is a building right practically in the center of West Acton, with a lot of water damage from the lack of gutters and from the runoff. And it's a building that's used principally by the library, I think, for book storage. I'm sorry? The old firehouse, yeah. Yep. And it's in need of some tender loving care. So we supported that as well, $56,000.
So, Bill,
Yep.
this is okay as far as the Secretary of Interior standards. It's preservation, not maintenance.
Well, maintenance is not inherently not qualified. Maintenance is protection of the building.
Well,
When it's rotting, it's not being protected. It's not being preserved. We had some of that discussion about Faulkner Hill and Jones Tavern paint jobs, and we got legal counsel to weigh in on that, and it's sort of like a judgment call.
okay, you made the call. All right.
Yeah, but we discussed it. Next one, Regional Housing Services Program, $40,000. This is an annual request that comes to us, and it's for services that are absolutely critically important around maintaining records and deed restrictions and making sure that all of our affordable housing is properly sustained and the records associated with them are up to date. And we're the town, and I think years back, the town did this work itself, and it's because it's a pooling of 8 towns' needs. The Regional Housing Services Program actually has economies of scale and efficiencies that no individual town could have. Now, you can have a debate, and the CPC is having a debate currently about, well, should this be part of the general budget, town budget? There was some discussion, I think, a year or 2 ago that it was going to be pushed towards the town budget and not be a CPC request. And that has not happened, but I do know that there's some members of the committee are fully expecting that's going to get worked. And perhaps in the years ahead, it will move to the municipal budget. But it's work that needs to be funded, and we're the funding source this year. Okay. By going through just the Warrant article, I'm not going to talk yet about the ones that were not approved because they're not there. So I'll cover them at the end. The Acton Community Housing Corporation, it's to go into their general fund, $200,000. This is an annual request, not the same dollar amount every year. It tends to fluctuate, but it can be very small money. It's been as low as $50,000 to $75,000 in years past. But our availability of our qualified affordable housing is not going in the right direction currently, and the challenges there are growing, not dissipating, and the committee felt strongly that this was an area that we needed to help invest in. The administrative and operating budget. This is a standard annual request, and it's been 5% in the past. It was, I think, 3-point-some-odd% a year ago. It's 4% this year, and it covers a variety of things. Most tangibly, the planning department's direct support of CPC, which is, I'd say, non-trivial work on their part. They do a lot of work in support of CPC. So that's the request there. In the Warrant article, we also have the debt service, which is really it's not debatable. You know, it's obligatory. And as I said before, it does qualify. Not that we use it to count towards the 10%. It's contributions into the fund that we focus on, and we far exceed that, and have far exceeded the 10% requirement every year for the last 7 years that I've been on the committee for. So, but it is something that I gather we have to include in the Warrant article for the town to vote. But to this day, if we were to terminate the 1.5% surcharge and try and disband the CPC activity, not until this debt is paid off. So it's mandatory. Okay, so that leaves two other projects that are not in the Warrant article that we did not fund. And that is the 468 Main Street. That was $50,000 request for paint and repairs, not entirely dissimilar from the Windsor Ave library annex, the old firehouse. And we spent a fair amount of time debating this one. And it basically came down to the belief that it's an historic house. It was built in 1915. It was bought by the town back, I think, around early 2004, 5, 6, something like that. So we've had it in the town's property inventory for almost 20 years. But it's been used, its use is, it's an administrative building. And we felt that it is a historic property, but it was acquired not because of its historic value. It was acquired because of its proximity to the town hall and town facilities, and it's used for administrative purposes. It's used by the town, and not by the citizenry per se. And so we drew the distinction between that and the Isaac Davis Monument, and just said this is not something that we should necessarily want to fund. And the last item that was on our list that we did not choose to fund, we almost did, was the West Acton Citizens Library, the ADA feasibility study for about $30,000. And this comes down to, it is, as much as anything, it's a catch-22. It's an historic building. The significant interior modifications for which are severely limited. The Historic Commission would not allow doorways and rooms to be reconfigured. We could build, so this was a feasibility study for, and some design work around putting a ramp to the front door and the design options for the interior. And it came to light that this was not the first feasibility study or design long story short, the building cannot be made ADA compliant. So there is a waiver that is hopefully going to be in the offing. And what we want to do is work with the applicant on developing a waiver process as opposed to getting another feasibility study, because apparently there have been one or two like studies done in the past, came to a pretty straightforward conclusion. I was not aware of that, and most of the committee was not previously aware of that. And so this is creating yet again another feasibility study that's going to produce the same result is not the way to, in our minds, effectively bring about or create a waiver. So we need to understand and work with the applicant to find out what that is. But as it was proposed, we decided not to fund it. So that's it.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the Finance Committee regarding Article 9 for the Community Preservation Committee? We're all questioned out. What about any questions regarding Article 10, which I see still has some to-be-determined summary data missing from the warrant?
Mr. Chairman, I'd say let's deal with Article 9 then.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Alesbury, thank you very much.
Can I ask just a question? And I want to make sure that if there is any project that's on this list that the CPC supports that FinCom does not, it would be good for us to know that ahead of time.
I think that's a fair question.
We're about to find out.
So I was planning on holding, all article votes until after we finished the third article, third item on our agenda, which is to discuss the town budget. But I think I could entertain a vote on this at the moment.
So my motion is for the Finance Committee to recommend, Article 9, CPA, direct appropriation from fund balances, as stated in the warrant article.
Second.
Discussion. Before we vote, I will make one point and make sure that Mr. Mangiarotti hears me, and I'll try to remember to send an email to Mark Hall that on the first page of this warrant article in the book, item E, Acton Housing Authority, address 362-364 Main Street has a typo. It says 362-264 Main Street. That's the only typo I found in it.
I found one other one, actually.
Go ahead.
I'll have to send them our esteemed town manager.
I believe those aren't significant, which shouldn't affect voting. So,
Unless you live at 264 Main Street.
pardon?
Unless you live at 264 Main Street.
Right. All right. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of recommending Article 9, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Fred.
Pardon me while I just make a note. And we will move on to the second item of business on our agenda this evening, which is public participation. Are there any members in the audience of the public who would like to make a statement? Okay. Seeing none, I will, pardon, Ms. Russell?
Can I just ask, will you allow members of the public to make statements on warrant articles as we go along, or would you like those members who have comments to come up now?
Probably we go along.
Yeah, I think if we limit any comments to 2 minutes,
Yeah.
we can take comments on articles. And obviously on our agenda item regarding the full town budget, we've already stated that we're taking comments on that
Okay,
item.
thanks.
So with that, we'll move right into item 3, which is the Town of Acton budget for fiscal year 24, which I believe also includes, or should include, components of some of the other warrants, which are, school committee and all of that. So at any rate, I believe we're talking about Article 4 here. Pardon? We're not doing an official hearing because official hearings have to be posted something like more than 2 weeks in advance. So instead, we're holding a agenda item where we're allowing the public to speak. Yeah. So are there any members of the public who would like to speak to the town budget? Okay. Where did I say we were? This is officially article number 4, is that correct? Okay. They're not articles?
Are we going through the warrant or are we going through your agenda, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I apologize. All right. Okay. So are there any discussion points or questions from the Finance Committee regarding the budget for the town of Acton for fiscal year 24? Seeing none, I would accept a motion.
I'm somewhat confused, but I'll give you the motion anyway. Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend Article 4, Town Operating Budget, in the amount of $37,382,147.
Discussion.
Do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Do we have the final ALG spreadsheet for this? And where does this put us with regard to free cash, the free cash floor that we've set?
Excellent.
Free cash, yeah. An ALG spreadsheet came out today. I won't call it final because it says draft on it. But it did not change the use of free cash from the $1.05 million that had been in the ALG spreadsheet all along.
Which leaves us a free cash balance of 3.23%.
I believe at the last meeting when we had this conversation, there was some concern about needing to use a little more free cash to get to the final number. Has that been resolved? I believe the town manager said that he was looking for other revenues, and one of those other revenues was free cash.
Yeah, and other revenue came from the automobile excise tax.
The use of free cash did not change
Did not change.
from the first ALG plan that we saw to this last one.
That's great news. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mangiarotti, you may approach the bench, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome.
John Mangiarotti, Town Manager. Thank you for talking about the budget. I appreciate it. We worked hard to get here, and your support and input throughout the process was helpful. Just to clarify the last dialogue point, the number was actually $1 million use of free cash a few months ago. And at one point, I did say we needed to find additional revenues to close the gap. And free cash was one of the sources we looked at. We were initially thinking of increasing it 150 to get where we needed to go in terms of revenue, and then we identified better than expected numbers in our motor vehicle, which allowed us to back off on use of free cash to only 50,000 of an increase, and the rest was filled with local receipts. So it did go up from $1 million to $1.05 million, but it still keeps us within the range that the Finance Committee has encouraged us to do, to meet in the past.
Thank you.
I stand corrected. I only noticed free cash in the million changes.
That's all right.
50,000 here, 50,000 there.
So I believe we had a motion on the floor and a second.
Yes.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? All right. So let's move along to ranked choice voting, and we should have Sam Fieldman here to present to us. Welcome, Mr. Fieldman. Article 36, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I know you all have busy schedules. I'm not sure how many of you were able to watch the presentation that I sent along that explained ranked choice voting in some detail, but I can go through it very quickly with a focus mainly on the parts that are most relevant to the Finance Committee as opposed to the more general presentation that I gave to the Select Board, as well as the longer version that's posted on ActonTV, both of which should be linked in an email that was sent to you. So why consider ranked choice voting? Well, we as a town have a number of values: individual freedom, inclusion, and participation. And these values are the same values that are embraced by and embodied in ranked choice voting itself. And what is ranked choice voting and how does it embody these values? Well, it allows candidates pretty simply to choose, instead of just their one favorite candidate from a long list of many candidates, but instead to choose quite a few, choose first their first choice candidate first, their second choice candidate second, their third choice candidate third, and so on. And that allows them to have a ballot that more fully expresses their views, which avoids various problems that I go into in more detail in the presentation online, such as bullet voting and wasting votes. It avoids things like the feeling like you need to pressure some candidates not to run, or fears of spoiler candidates. All those things are eliminated by having a ballot that more accurately reflects the views of the voters in Acton. So how are they counted? Well, the good news is we have new voting machines in Acton as of a couple years ago, and those machines that we just got already are adequate and ready to count ranked choice ballots. So that would not be something that we would have to redo. The way the procedure works in those machines, we can use this sample mock election. Let's say my favorite candy is Reese's Pieces, or Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And we have an election, and we look at the first choice ballots of everybody in the election. And it looks like Reese's Peanut Butter Cups did not do very well. They came in last there. Unfortunately, my choice gets eliminated, and we move on. My ballot then gets counted for my second choice, which is M&M's. Other people who voted Reese's, their ballots get redistributed to the other ones that are their second and third choice too. And that's fine, because I still have a candidate that I really like in that race, M&M's. So my vote for Reese's is not wasted. We then just repeat the process. After those votes are redistributed to people's second and third and et cetera choices, or to people's second choices rather, we then see Kit Kat now has the fewest votes. M&M's is doing a little better, but it's still below the 50% threshold. So we do the same thing. We eliminate Kit Kat, and people who voted for Kit Kat as their next choice, their votes get moved to whatever their next choice vote was. Once we do that, we see M&M's now has more than 50% of the vote, which makes M&M's the winner. And the machines we have right now are already capable of handling that. And that's it in order to do ranked choice voting. You may be wondering where it's used, and some of that gets into a little bit about what we don't have currently that we will need. It's used around the world in countries like New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Scotland. It's also used in states all over the country, Maine and Alaska. It's used in some forms in various towns in Utah, California, Maryland, all over the country, in towns in those cities and towns in those states. And it's used in Massachusetts as well. It's been in use in Cambridge since 1942 and East Hampton since 2019. So we have a history of using it here in Massachusetts now for over 80 years. And more recently, Concord, Amherst, Northampton, and Arlington submitted home rule petitions to allow them to use it as well. And then there's over a dozen other towns that are currently in some stage of considering the process, including here in Acton. And Arlington is an interesting case. They adopted it in 2020 and have a home rule petition pending. And their clerk recently purchased the software, their town purchased the software that you need in order to run ranked choice voting. And they love it for purposes far beyond the use in ranked choice voting itself. There's many benefits. So first, the obvious ones are, as I mentioned earlier, more civil campaigns and end of spoiler candidates. It increases voter turnout and increased diversity of candidates. And again, I go into this in more detail in the presentation you can find online. And it's also widely supported here in Acton, with 60% of Acton residents voted yes on ballot question 2 that asked about bringing ranked choice voting for statewide and federal elections. So it would be implemented according to the Warrant article in 2025. And that gives us several years to plan and prepare for it, allow for voter education, as well as to budget for it. There's also a matter of whether or not, of when the home rule petition would be adopted. And that's something that we're working hard to make sure goes through at the state level. Until that happens, we wouldn't, it wouldn't be in place here in Acton. Once it's in place here in Acton, it would improve our elections for all of our local elected offices, including this body, as well as school board, select board, school committee, water district, all of those. And yeah, the costs and benefits, which is the part that's most relevant to you, which is why I wanted to move through the rest a little quicker. So the part that we don't have that we need is software from our vendor. It would be available from the same Massachusetts company that we that we currently use as a vendor for elections. And the initial investment for that would be $12,000 with an annual license estimated at $1,200. And the benefits that you get for that go well beyond just the generic ranked choice voting benefits. The reason why they've been so happy with it in Arlington, for example, is that it allows for a less error-prone system. Currently, they have to read the numbers off the machine and tabulate them in an Excel spreadsheet, and that process can cause mistakes and issues. It's also time-consuming, labor-intensive. With this system, it's simple plugging it into the machine, and it avoids those kinds of errors. So it would be significantly more helpful in that. It also allows for more options in terms of ballot design that we can handle locally. And so, you know, the question shouldn't be just why should we do it? With all these, the benefits, the more positive elections, more engaging for voters, more inclusion and representation, as well as costs that are relatively minimal for the kinds of normal upgrades that we would expect to have for our system, then, you know, the question really should be, why wouldn't we do it? And with that, I'll entertain any questions or comments. Yes?
Mr. Borden.
A couple slides back, you had that the Finance Committee was elected. We're not elected. We're appointed by the town moderator.
I apologize.
So you might want to
I will correct that on the slide.
correct that out of there.
Thank you.
That's the only comment I have.
Mr. Cole?
I have a couple of questions. On this cost, I must have missed something. Is this just a software package, or is this going to replace the scanning machines that we currently use?
No, it would just be the software package. The scanning machines that were purchased a couple of years ago are already the right kind of scanning machines to handle this.
Okay, so we don't need to replace the scanning machines?
Nope, we've already done that.
Get to leverage all of that. This is just the software package over and above.
Yep.
How does, my understanding of the RCV is that this is not a forced rank. This is a recommended rank, and that people can still be what are referred to as insincere voters by not filling out all possible votes. So if there's 5 spots, they only fill out the top 3, that's still legal in this format of voting, correct?
I think I'm going to have to defer that question to someone who knows more about ranked choice voting.
So that does not solve the insincere voting potential problem. Also, this does not, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not a forced rank, this is an RCV, not a forced rank process, it does not necessarily create for a Condorcet winner. So you can still have a situation where the people that end up winning are not necessarily the consensus winner of the side. Whereas in the Australian method, you have to apply a value. You have to apply a score to each candidate, which then does cause for a straightforward calculation to determine the most likely Condorcet winner and also get the greatest will of the voter. And I do have a quick, I don't want to share it unless I have to, I do have a quick 4.4 PowerPoint slide that shows how this process, because it is not a forced rank, actually helps allow extremer candidates to win than more consensus-driven candidates to win, as was the case in the Alaska election, as one recent example of what's been done. What did you investigate trying to do a forced rank? Did you investigate how to get to a Condorcet winner? Or is this something that you're looking at as a second phase?
I can provide part of an answer to that, and then I would like to defer to for a more complete answer. But first, in the case of Alaska, I would disagree that a more extremist candidate won. I would tend to view the current senator from Alaska to be more in line with where the state is than either of the other two candidates who are in that race, is my understanding.
Actually, the mathematical analysis of that shows that if it had been a head-to-head, which is the definition of Condorcet,
Yeah.
she would not have won.
I'm familiar with the Condorcet method somewhat, but I'm not familiar enough with it to fully address that. Monica, would you be able to address that question?
Come on up to the microphone.
Yeah, people watching at home can't hear you.
Welcome.
So with this system, people can rank as many or as few candidates as they would like. And with this system, we can have, for example, with the Candy situation, which we will have in this election, I believe we have 4 candidates for select board. Just like that Candy election, you're going to have someone winning with less than 50% of the vote. So somebody could win with 22% of the vote, and that would mean that 78% of the people would actually not support them. So with this system, you would actually have the majority. People can just rank one person. Franny, right here.
That's the definition of an insincere vote.
So you can rank the same way you rank now. You can vote the same way you vote now. You can just vote for, what do we have, Franny and Jim and a couple of other people running. You can just vote for Jim. You can just vote for Franny. You can vote for whomever you want, or you could rank them. We have 4 people running for select board. There's going to be vote splitting. We have, I think, 6 people running for school committee, and we have, I think, 4 people or 3 people running for library trustees. So this particular election is a perfect example of why we would use this here.
Can I add?
Understand. Go ahead.
It's a mathematical theorem that there is no perfect election voting system. Every method, including the Condorcet method, is subject to various types of flaws. However, this method, I believe, has the best combination of reflecting the view of the people as well as simplicity for the voters themselves, which is why I think it makes a lot of sense for adoption and use. It's certainly not the only option, but I think it is a significant improvement over what we have now, and certainly that's why I'm supporting it.
So people can rank as many or as few as they like. Right now, you're going to go in and vote. There's going to be 4 people, I think, for select board. You're going to vote for 1. With this, you could indicate your preference. You would have your first choice, second, third, fourth. You could just vote for 1, 2, 3, or 4. Forcing people to rank, it doesn't guarantee a Condorcet winner, and it's not insincere if they no longer have a preference. If you just want Jim, that's it. Just vote for Jim. You don't need to vote for anybody else. Or you can indicate that. There is not a software package that has a Condorcet method, and no jurisdiction in the United States of America, and virtually none around the world, use a Condorcet system. This is used by millions of people in the United States of America. More questions, please.
Could you just expound a little bit on what defines an insincere?
An insincere vote is where you are purposely changing or purposely casting your vote in such a manner to give preference to a specific thing, to a specific candidate. So in the case of this coming election where there are 4 candidates and there are 2 slots, we are allowed to vote for 2. We're voting for 2 if there are 2 that you like. That is considered a sincere vote. Sincere. If you choose to only vote for 1 because you want to put your thumb on the scales for that one person, it is considered an insincere vote because you are not voting the full extent of your voting ability. You're not voting your full capabilities.
So you're affecting the ratio.
So you're affecting the ratio, making it therefore insincere. Whereas if you had a forced ranked voting, what ends up happening, and it's easier to do with 3 than with 4, just for the sake of quick math here. If you are forced to give a value of yes, meh, and no thank you, your yes vote gets a point value of 2, your meh vote gets a value of 1, and your no thank you gets a value of 0. And it's actually very straightforward, and I have a slideshow that I ran past Mr. Noon to make sure that I was not being completely inaccurate here, that clearly shows how you can very easily have the person who came in dead last in an RCV method end up being the Condorcet winner, the one who has the most votes. So picture, if you will, a middle-of-the-road candidate and somebody on one wing and somebody on the other wing. I'm not bringing up parties, I'm not bringing up ideologies. I'm just saying you got one wing, the other wing, and a centrist. If one wing gets 40% on the first vote, and the other wing gets 35% on the first vote, and the centrist gets 25 on the first vote, in RCV, or immediate elimination, the 25% vote person is gone immediately. Whereas, if, say the 2 wings hate each other, they would never vote for each other. Therefore, they get to go ahead and vote for their person they like best. They gets their 2 points, doesn't get them over the maximum threshold. But they're fine with the meh voter. If that environment exists where the 2 wings are extreme enough or anti each other enough, then the middling guy, the center of the road one, will win. And I can show that in the slide. With the ranked choice voting, the one who is the will of the people or the most palatable or least disliked ends up not even being an option at the time of election. You're confused. I can show you my slide.
Ms. Anderson.
Jason, is this relevant to the financial decisions?
The only reason I bring it up is because I would hate for us to make this change now and then to come back in a couple of years and say, we would like something that does not encourage or allow for an extreme election to occur. We wanted to have something that was even more fair, even more reflective of the town's vote, and then end up having to make the change twice in a relatively short period of time. I am absolutely sympathetic to the concept of changing the way we currently vote. I'm not convinced that this is the right method, and I want to make sure that we have a full hearing of it before we commit, because what I don't want to do is spend $20,000 now, which is not a ton of money. I'm not going to die on this hill, but I don't want to make this change and do all the education of the voters, et cetera, and then 2 or 3 years from now go, oh crap, we don't like what we're getting. We want to change this to a different method.
Okay, so while you're preparing that, which I'm going to deliberate in my mind whether or not we'll see it tonight or whether we want to save it for another time, are there any other questions for?
May I address that?
Yes, go ahead.
Just as I had mentioned before, there are theoretical flaws with every single voting system. It's a mathematical theorem. It's been proven, including the Australian system, which would be great if it were an option. There is no software package that would allow us to adopt that system. so it is not an option that is currently available to us. Whereas this method is a vast improvement over the system that we have currently. It is a system that's in place in the United States in many places, and a system that we can actually do because there is the software package for it, and it is also significantly simpler for the voters to use. I would be it's at least as simple for the voters to use, if not simpler. I'd be happy to share with you, if you want, videos that explain the flaws in that system as well. I think CGP Gray has a series that explains them. I think 3 Blue 1 Brown does as well. They're both excellent professional videos. I don't think that's terribly relevant, though, because it's a method that is not available as an option to us. And if it were available, I would support that one as well as this one.
Okay, great. So let's hold that discussion for just a moment. Mr. Majors, go ahead if you have questions for Mr. Fieldman.
First, a basic question. What problem are you trying to solve for Acton?
Sure. So there are a number of problems that are solved by ranked choice voting. The very basic one is to have elected officials that better represent we the people of Acton. There are situations where there may be many good candidates that, and you have your particular favorite, but you feel like you don't want that candidate to run because they may not be as viable, and you are afraid that they will be a spoiler for somebody else. You would want to encourage them not to even run rather than run and try to build viability. It would pit you against a candidate that is your preferred candidate in the race. Overall, the elections that are done with ranked choice voting, we've seen this in Maine and other places, are often more civil because they have candidates who want to be not only people's first choice, but people's second choice, and they don't want to anger the voters of another candidate. And those kind of benefits allow a ranked choice vote to better reflect the will of the people in Acton.
So you see that as a problem for Acton?
I see that as a problem on occasion in Acton, and I see it as a problem that has cropped up in worse ways in many places, and I don't want to see it crop up in worse ways here.
Okay.
But I have seen it as a problem on occasion in Acton, yes.
Well, I think it's a very complicated system. And it seems, especially for a blue town and in a blue state, it only helps really Democrats. And I think if something like this was implemented, you would never, ever, ever see a moderate or a conservative elected to any position in the town of Acton. The person with the most votes can lose, and your vote might not count if it's exhausted. It delays the results. It violates one person, one vote. Ranked choice voting would only add confusion that is a turnoff to voters. In places like Pierce County, they adopted ranked choice voting in 2006. 3 years later, they repealed it. In California, Jerry Brown got rid of ranked choice voting because he felt it was far too complicated. Some other comment. Ranked choice voting is a scheme to disconnect elections from issues and allows candidates with marginal support for voters to win elections, and which is sort of verifies what Jason was saying. In the end, it's all about political power, not about what is best for the voter and preserving our great republic. It also disenfranchises voters because ballots that do not include the two ultimate finalists are cast aside to manufacture a false majority for the winner, which also verifies what Jason was saying. It obscures true debate and issue-driven dialogue among candidates, and it eliminates genuine binary choices between the two top-tier candidates. Such a system would, Jerry Brown got rid of it in...
Mike, I apologize. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is if you've got questions for the presenter, we'll get those down and save, I believe what
Okay.
you're stating is statements to try to sway the vote, which I think is maybe more appropriate for the discussion before the vote, unless you need a specific response from the presenter.
Well, basically, I'm thinking it's solving a problem that doesn't exist for Acton.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And do you
can-
have any questions, or do you want a response from Mr. Fieldman on any?
I
No,
can
well,
tell you as
I don't
a-
think they can answer the question.
I mean, I can answer that specific question. I've seen discussions in instances where where there have been elections with more good candidates than there are seats in multi-seat races, and people hoping that a candidate that they like would drop out because they're afraid of that spoiler effect. I've seen that in conversations that I've had, and the people who've had those conversations have repeatedly said, if we had ranked choice voting, I'd be happy that all these people were running, but I can't be happy that all these people are running because I'm afraid of the spoiler effect.
I believe Franny right here has been in multiple elections. Right here, Franny Osman, who's on the ballot again. And, we don't know what people who vote for her, what's the second choice? What's the third choice? They can't indicate that because we have the problem in Acton of the vote splitting and the spoiler candidate. So right here, Franny Osman, case in point.
I literally had that conversation.
David Martin, case in point. I believe it was David, Dean, and Jim Snyder Grant, again. If you could rank your candidates,
Well,
when
that
you have
would
more
apply
than
in
two
any-
people, then you don't have the spoiler effect.
That would apply in any election anywhere, if there's more than two candidates that you can vote for.
So with
Exactly.
ranked choice
Unless you have
voting,
Well,
it
that's
solves
the-
this
That's the
problem.
American way. You get the vote.
And you get to-
Sometimes you win,
The
sometimes
Constitution
you
does
lose.
not specify the method of voting. It just calls for a Republican form of government, which is representative government.
Okay. Mr. Wellinghoff.
Yeah, a quick question on the ranking when you actually vote. What happens if you put in like 2 second choices?
Do you know the answer to that? The software handles that?
So if you put in, say, for example, Franny first and Jim second and also Norton second.
Yes.
So in that specific case, the algorithm that would be an error.
The
So
ballot
you're,
wouldn't count.
the algorithm doesn't know which you wanted second because you put two people on the second line. So that's a human error.
I can verify that and get back to you with.
Just
the
like right
record.
now, if you put Franny and, the system can't ascertain what your second preference is if you're putting multiple people as your second.
No, I understand. I guess I'm asking is putting this on a ballot obviously introduces complexity to it. I understand the theory of it, but clearly having a bunch of choices, any voter needs to go through and rank 1 through 3 or 5 or whatever it is, obviously makes it more complicated.
The machine detects
It actually
the error.
simplifies it because right now we have to play strategist. We have to all become political strategists when we go into
But
vote.
not from a
If-
vote counting perspective.
There's a concrete answer to your question. The machine spits out the ballot, detects the error, spits out the ballot, and asks the voter to correct the human error.
So a person would go up to the machine, submit the ballot with 2 second ranks, a first and then 2 seconds, and the ballot would come back out, and then they would be told by the proctor or whoever to say, this is an invalid ballot, here's a new one, go fill it out.
That's my understanding.
So that's an improvement with the Democracy Suite software.
Okay.
So that's,
Just like the big other bonus with the Democracy Suite software is with the human error component. I'm not sure if everybody really caught that when Sam was going through it, but right now, have you ever seen those white ticker tapes, right, that come out? Have you ever seen that? that come out of the machine. So when we vote now, there are these white ticker tapes that come out of the voting machines, and Eva and her helpers, the amazing poll workers, they tape them up on election night, and there's the potential, and recently we've seen human error. You've probably seen human error, Franny, in those.
The machines that we purchased a couple of years ago do detect
Yeah.
that human error with the current system as well.
Yeah, so we actually saw in 2021, I think it was, votes were put in a precinct for a write-in and not for the candidates. So, I mean, we're humans and we can make these errors. So this software would also take care of that issue.
Yeah, just one final is, would you agree that that with this system or the existing system, there would be more human error votes with this system? I'm sure, certainly the data is out there that 100,000 people submitted ballots and 2,000 were rejected versus 3,000.
The machines that we purchased 2 years ago detect those kinds of errors with either the current system or ranked choice voting, and those machines reduce. I don't know the number of ballots that get rejected in Acton. That's something we could look into. I imagine that it's low because the machines are able to handle that with either system.
So currently, if there's a human error currently.
If there's a human error, the ballot would be
rejected
rejected and you'd have a chance to change it, and that's the same with ranked choice voting.
Okay. Thanks.
Isha, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
How about you, Vladimir?
And that tabulation, the minimizing of the human error will be for all of our elections, not just the municipality elections. So for governor, for president, for all of these, the human error component will be minimized because of the upgrade in the software.
The information that
So
I
it
have
will
is
make
that-
Eva's life easier, the clerk's life easier.
The information that I have is that in general, there are not more rejected ballots with ranked choice voting than with the other systems.
Ms. Anderson?
If we tried ranked choice voting and it didn't work out, would this software work with,
Yes.
kind of back to the
Yes,
current
ma'am.
standard? So this wouldn't need replacing
Correct.
again?
Correct.
And there are other municipalities that use this software for elections that are not ranked choice voting, Arlington being one example, who rave about the benefits that they get from that software entirely regardless of ranked choice voting.
And we could potentially have town clerks in other places that use this software talk to you, potentially, if that is something that you're interested in.
Mr. Borden?
If this passed, how much would it cost to train the voters to be able to go through this and to?
How hard was it for me to pick this sweater today? I had 3 choices.
Well, I mean,
This was my first choice. We rank all day.
that's not my question. That's not my answer.
Okay.
We're a finance committee. We look at finances. We don't look at how much your sweaters cost and which ones you're going to wear that day. So I think that's a little disingenuous to the finance committee.
I don't have an estimate on the cost for training. There would be plenty of time. That's the reason why it was selected as 2025 to begin would be to give us time to handle that over a longer period of time, and that in having a longer period of time reduces the cost involved. There's also a matter that the home rule petition may take longer than that, which gives us longer than that to educate voters on that as well.
In places where ranked choice voting's been instituted, exit polls are taking place, and usually it's 80, 85%, 90% of the voters like the ranked choice voting, and they want to keep it because they like being able to indicate their preferences. It simplifies the process because you can just vote first, second, third, and so forth, or you can vote the same way, just bullet vote, just that one person.
Mr. Borden?
So what do you do for town meeting then?
It wouldn't, ranked choice voting wouldn't apply in town meeting. It's for elections, not for.
Well, I mean, town meeting does the town's business. I mean, the same type of thing you're going after. You're going after
Typically in town.
Let me finish. You're going after a small amount of people that show up at town meeting, 300, 350, and it's yes or no. And it's up or down. That's it.
Exactly. So in that case, our ranked choice voting is typically only used when there's 3 choices or more. I don't think most of the articles that we have on the warrant are 3 choices or more.
Yeah.
They're usually yes or no, up or down, correct?
When there's only 2 options, a ranked choice vote is exactly the same as first past the post vote. So essentially, town meeting does use ranked choice voting because it's exactly the same in that case where there's only 2 options. Also, there are nonprofits like the League of Women Voters and Voters Choice Massachusetts that work on the education, and their participation dramatically reduces the costs for the town.
There are also national organizations that focus on that as well as state and local organizations.
Okay, so do we have a statement from the clerk's office as to their opinion or their preference on this?
I spoke to the clerk's office this morning, and they said that as a general policy, they're not going to give a preference on a question that's before a vote from the town.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is that something that you would like?
Well, if it's ethical and okay for them to give it, it would certainly be interesting if the clerk thinks it's going to make their lives better or make their lives worse.
So you might be interested in hearing from Eva, the Concord clerk. They've passed it next door in Concord, the East Hampton clerk, Arlington clerks, some of these people?
Possibly so.
Possibly.
Does anybody else feel that that's a valid opinion, or is that more of a logistic?
I think if Eva was already approached and she punted on it, I don't think it's right for us to try and haul her in and make her say her opinion.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't speak to the clerk themselves, but I spoke to the clerk's office, but I imagine that policy would apply to the clerk.
Okay, so I have a couple questions before we continue discussion on this. One of which is a little bit of, I think, a recreation of, I think it was Mike's question about examples, because I think you've both mentioned that there are examples. So specifically, can you give us at least one or a couple of examples where ranked choice voting would have saved the town of Acton either massive headache, massive hassle, or a certain amount of money?
It's hard to do that without without commenting on politicians that people may have different views on.
When you say the town of Acton, who are we referring to?
Well, I mean, can you give us an example of any election in the town of Acton where had we had ranked choice voting, the outcome would have been vastly different in a way that you can articulate?
So I can't predict. I can't predict.
So
It's all speculation. I can't predict. I just mentioned, Franny here was and David have been in some elections. I can't predict how people would vote. In terms of headache, I don't know how much of a headache it was for Eva when that error happened in, I think it was 2021, but the software would have automatically caught that.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I would not want to personally comment on various candidates, but I can think of examples of races where the preference of the voters of the town of Acton were not necessarily reflected in the vote total. But I'd rather not elaborate.
Okay.
But that's also speculation because
Yeah.
you don't know
That is
how
certainly
people are going to
speculation.
indicate their second choice or their third choice.
Right.
And maybe they
Yes.
still would just vote the same way and just vote for one person.
So
We don't really know.
will you be presenting to the select board again?
We were not planning to present to them a second time.
They approved it. They were extremely supportive, 4 of them, and 1 was against, I believe. We would be more than happy to give a more elaborate presentation here if that is something that y'all would be interested in.
There's also the very real possibility that we can do something that we almost never do, which is take no action on this. And we're talking about relatively small dollars here. So this is not, while I am usually the person who hangs from the rafters and says everything's got a financial impact, this may be one time where, because we're only talking, what, $12,000?
$12,000 and $1,200 annual.
We may decide to take a pass on this. But if I had to make my statement right now, I would not recommend, because I would love to see it be a forced rank system. And I understand you say that doesn't exist, but it's not impossible to demand. Otherwise, I don't necessarily see why we have to do it. I see this being a better step, but I don't see it being the whole thing, and I'm worried about us doing this as a stutter step. So I could go either way. I could either not recommend, or I could say let's punt it.
Okay. Any more questions for the presenters?
Thank you.
We really do appreciate you coming and presenting. I didn't expect this to be quite as colorful as it's been. Thank you so much. Since we did say we would take public comments on some of the items, Ms. Fredericks, do you have
just a quick
a comment
comment.
on this?
Yes, Sarah Fredericks, I'm West Acton. I am in favor of trying this, and I like the comments that have, the caution, and I like the idea of going back if we don't like it. But I will point out that I'm sure you didn't book these guys to promote Jim or Franny for the election, but there is another candidate running, Alyssa Nicole, and there are only 3. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Just turn the microphone off, please, Tara. Thank you. Okay. Whose article is this? Do you wish to make any type of motion, or would you like to defer this?
I'm going to, Mr. Chairman, I move that we make no recommendation on this article.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for no recommendation on this article. Discussion. Ms. Russell.
I'm all for not taking a position when there's no monetary value, but there's a cost to this one. It's small, but I think it counts. It's within our purview to make a recommendation or do not recommend. Personally, I think it's a great first step. I'm willing to move there. There may be a more ideal way of voting, but I can't find where that is used anywhere in any government at this time. Ranked choice voting actually has a history of increasing voter turnout, and it increases candidates, especially candidates of color. So I think it's a positive. I think that, yes, it's a little complicated, but I also think we are surrounded by a very bright populace who can handle, I get to make a first choice and a second choice and move on. So I would actually be in favor of moving us in this direction.
Other comments, discussion? Mr. Majors, now is the good time for you to finish your soliloquy.
Well, it's quick. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wellinghoff.
Yeah, I have a little hesitation, mostly because it is used in very limited situation, very, it's not widely spread, and, I personally think the ballot is much more complicated, of a design, and, we've all hear the horror stories in some states of the complications that come from not understanding the ballots and folks not knowing who they're voting for. So I would disagree at the point that about the financial impact. I agree the dollars here are not at stake, but I was listening to Mike's commentary, and if it does skew the voting populace in one direction or another, I don't have evidence of that, and Mike can expound on that if you'd like. But certainly that would have a different tax consequence for the town, albeit at whatever the trade-offs are, at greater voter turnout, more representative voting, et cetera. I'm not taking a position on that, but I do think something of this nature can have a much larger financial impact than obviously the $12,000 or $20,000 of the investment in that, which obviously we would all agree is trivial in the scope of $100 million budget. The item just that gives me most pause is that it does seem to be relatively untested. There are some examples of success, but we certainly don't know what all the pros and cons of those individual towns and counties and states or whatever are. Simple questions of how many ballots were thrown out due to human error before and after. I mean, this is all information that should be well known and well advertised now. And if we don't know that, there's clearly a lot of uncertainty about proceeding down the path of changing the town's voting system. So I think no vote is where I land. I'm probably skewed a little bit more towards against the article, but I'm not for it at this point, and I would think it'd be worth revisiting at some point for sure.
Eva, or Isha, I'm sorry. Ms. Gangali?
No, I'm in favor of ranked choice voting for all of the reasons that were mentioned.
Vladimir? Any comment, question?
Assumptions, statistical assumptions to this system, or like, are there any weights assigned to? I'm not fully understanding how this method works, because an example or any statistical assumptions, or like, are there any weights assigned to, like, option 1, option 2, option 3? So if I don't understand fully something, I can't.
Right. Understood. So I believe the bulk of the information that Mr. Fieldman sent us should be able to answer some of those questions for you, I believe. Ms. Anderson, you had a comment?
The hesitancy I am hearing against this article is based on personal perceptions that have nothing or very little to do with financial implications. So I would like to steer the committee back towards that as their focus on this article. I hear Jason's concerns, but at the same time, it sounds to me like maybe this is just better software. I wish in some ways we could separate the ideas, because it sounds like this would let us avoid problems, just ensuring that we have good ballots and the right information gets translated, because I remember the situation in which it looked like someone wasn't winning who actually had, and luckily it got caught. The research I've done into ranked choice voting, moving a little away from the financial, is that, like everything else, it has problems. A lot of the examples I've seen that people cite as errors where the wrong thing happened would have had the wrong thing happen under our current situation anyhow. This has been happening in many places for a long time, so we should be able to get the answers that Dave wants, at least. This feels like, I think, a bigger change than it is. So I don't know where that makes me fall, but I think purely flat out financial, what I'm walking away from this is that sounds like good software, that if we make this try and it doesn't work out, it's actually beneficial to the town to have made this investment. Either way. So for me, it comes down to a question of financially, I think this is fine. Just where do we fall? Which I guess pushes me back to the no recommendation, because I think it sounds like good software, but that's inseparable from the policy that we're discussing here. So I'm back to being with Jason on no recommendation.
Okay, Jason, since this is your article, and since I also am concerned about the somewhat non-financial but potentially down the road financial impact of, quote, somebody gaming the system, I think if you would like to give your presentation on how you feel the system can be gamed, I would leave it up to you whether you want to present that now.
I don't think I need to, because
Okay.
that's if we're doing this strictly from a financial perspective, I'm back to no recommendation at all.
Okay.
As a more academic conversation, I'm much more of a fan of forced ranked voting than I am of purely ranked choice. And if the statement is we can't get forced ranked voting, that's most unfortunate, because I think that's a much cleaner solution. So I would just say that at this point we have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Chair.
Are there any other discussion points? So with that, I will remind everybody that the motion on the floor is to make no recommendation for Article 36 on ranked choice voting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. I am also voting nay. Sorry, I should have spoke louder at the same time. That sounded fishy, I apologize.
So do it by.
Any abstentions? So it was 3 nays.
And 5 yeas.
So we have voted to make no recommendation. Okay, thank you all. And thank you for coming and presenting. Next item is Kelley's Corner, Franny Osman. Welcome.
The clerk has a question about how the vote finished. Was it 5-3 and nothing, or was it 6-3, or was it 5-4?
Sorry, 9 votes, that would be
It was
6 and 3.
6-3? Okay.
I have to count on my fingers. So, Franny, we're just waiting to upload your slides?
Sure, I can
Okay.
start talking before then, if you want. Save time.
Whichever way is better for you.
Because I didn't put the actual citizens petition in there. You seem to be flipping through something. Do you have a copy of the draft? Okay, so you have it in front of you, but in case someone's watching, is this taped?
Yes, and it's
Okay.
broadcast live.
Okay.
You're on CNN.
Great. So I put in a citizen's petition, which reads as follows: Be it resolved that this town meeting requests that the Select Board ask the Kelley's Corner Steering Committee to review and update the February 4th, 2016 Kelley's Corner Improvement Initiative Plan this year, and to work with the Planning Department to develop an updated draft zoning plan for Kelley's Corner. Oh, thanks. So as I pass through Kelley's Corner, I'm always thinking about where we're going and how we got to this point and whether we are as far along as we wanted to be. I'm about to have slides, so I'll... Okay. Well, some of the background about Kelley's Corner is that we have an Acton 2020 master plan, the comprehensive community plan. And what it says about Kelley's Corner is that we wanted to develop Kelley's Corner into a mixed-use town center and transportation hub in conformance with a specific plan for the area, that we envision mixed use with housing, shops, and restaurants with opportunities for socializing, running errands, dining, and community gathering. Sorry. It's okay. That's fine. And we want to attract teens from the school complex and provide them with a safe place to meet, eat, shop, and recreate. And we want to be both fiscally and environmentally sustainable. So the question is, did we do that? That comprehensive community plan, Acton 2020, was published in 2012. The Kelley's Corner Improvement Initiative plan was published in 2016. And it was a comprehensive planning project that looked at both infrastructure and land use improvements. And there was a significant public engagement over several years. The town paid for consultants to work with the committee, and many hours, obviously, of our planning staff and other staff. The Kelley's Corner Improvement Initiative Plan included vision and action items, draft zoning, draft design guidelines, and concept plan for the infrastructure. I put the link to it. I don't know if it's in the written version, but I put the link so people could know that they can get online and read the Kelley's Corner plan. So in 2016, the final presentation of the plan was presented in this room with standing room only and received a standing ovation. There was a lot of positive response to it. Also in 2016, the Select Board and the Planning Board approved the plan. It's okay, I'm on page, you could go slowly through that if you want.
Sure.
So people could sort of
Do you want me to jump to a
read it if they,
particular page?
just sort of go slowly so they can
Okay.
review what I said, muse on it. I haven't been in front of the Finance Committee in a long time, but I used to come before you a lot, so.
Yeah, we've missed you, Franny.
Oh, thanks. I missed you too. So the funding in 2016, the next part of the history, at town meeting, there were 3 articles. There was a funding article to approve funds to hire a civil engineer to complete the infrastructure design plans, and that vote passed. There was also a funding article to approve funds for appraisals, acquisitions, costs, and light poles, and that vote passed. And then there was a zoning article that would allow for some of this improvement. It would allow for higher density mixed use with multifamily allowed above commercial. And that vote failed, although it got more than 60% of the vote, but was missing the then required 2/3 vote by 16 votes. I don't have the total numbers, but you get the picture. It was more than 60%. So zoning in the area of Kelley's Corner hasn't changed since 1996, and development under that zoning has not produced much change toward a walkable center. In 2016, there was a developer waiting to work with the town to reimagine the Kmart property, and those plans disappeared after the zoning didn't pass. After that, the state took over most of the design costs through the Transportation Improvement Program, and the town was able to reappropriate the funds it had earmarked for the 2016 appropriations for other uses. The project's now under construction, and there are some changes in business mix and some proposed development of the Kmart property. But the question is the area changing in ways we want? We haven't put input into it in 7 years. There are so many possibilities for the area: increased walkability, a healthy commercial mix, a future siting of the senior center, perhaps. Some people mention a community center. There's housing. There's possibility of a transportation hub. So I brought this citizens petition because I just want to reactivate the plans and the planning for Kelley's Corner. Let's return to the table and pass zoning that represents our vision for Kelley's Corner, so we make sure that the infrastructure improvements underway serve as leverage toward development that is in line with our values. That's all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions from the Finance Committee? I'll start on this end. And I'll go to this side. Mr. Majors.
I always have an opinion. Basically, Franny, I agree with you. It was a good plan. But as long as the Kmart property is still owned by Kmart or Stop and Shop, they are the owner. And they, I think, secretly, or at least they didn't play their cards, show their cards until recently, that they see that the infrastructure that we're putting in at Kelley's Corner has done a lot to increase the value of their property and all the properties around it. And they saw it finally as an opportunity, I guess, in their own self-interest to put a store back in there, a Stop and Shop, a mini Stop and Shop, and small retail on either side. But both of them, really don't address what was in our plan. And I guess the question is, as long as the owner owns the property, it's his right to do what he wants, as long as it's within, current guidelines. So I think that's our dilemma. If we didn't get to do what we wanted it to do, we had some wonderful plans there, and it all assumed that Kmart would go away. The physical building and that, or that referencing Tara's idea from several years ago that the town buy the site, which we didn't think was a good idea. We don't have the money for one. And it's not our business to be doing that. But I see it as a dilemma. I don't know if we can work around the existing structure, there'll be 3 businesses there. I don't know what kind of businesses. Maybe we can influence what happens on either side of the smaller Stop and Shop. And maybe the McDonald's site, and it's still a pretty significant parcel of land there that you could do something with, and maybe that's where we should focus our energy. But with regard to the Stop and Shop site itself, I think our hands are tied.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Cole?
First, let me say I appreciate the passion that you bring to this, and I remember just how fraught that 2016 election was. Unfortunately, you and I have talked about this on a couple of occasions. Unfortunately, I'm still on the other side of the argument than you. I think that the 2016 vote was, thank God it went the way that it went. I can't imagine just how much damage that project would have done to our town. In particular, on the slide you ask, is this area changing in the ways that we want? We spend a lot of time in this committee and in the town discussing the mix between commercial and residential. This is the last large, wholly commercial lot in town. I do not want to see it changed from commercial in any way, shape, or form. There is no such thing as a good mixed-use commercial residential. You're taking away the last big commercial lot in town. I don't want to buy it. I don't want to put a senior center on it. I don't want to put a community center on it. I want it to stay commercial. If all we have is unfortunately yet another grocery store, okay, that's the owner's prerogative, to Mr. Major's point. Is this area changing the ways that we want? No, I don't want it to change. I want it to stay a commercial zone. Would I have loved for the previous select board to have allowed in the Panera bread that was there? Would I have loved it if the option for the Ocean State job lot that showed a letter of interest, but would I have thought that was a fine choice? Absolutely. Anything that stays 100% commercial. I even remember there was some talk about there being a car dealership there, but apparently they now have a much larger spot up on the Nagog property. I do not want to see this change from being commercial, so I would not vote to make zoning changes to this area. Thank you.
Go ahead, Franny.
I just want to point out that I tried to keep any opinion about what it should become out of this because, first of all, it can be mixed where there's commercial and with housing above. And also, I tried to keep my opinion about, all I want to do is come to the table and talk to the town about it again and have the Kelley's Corner committee reactivated. I don't mean to give any opinion about what we should have there through this.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Ms. Anderson.
Do you know about how much the last project cost, or rather what this would be expected to cost in terms of doing this sort of research? The previous one was a significant work, clearly with some graphic design and research behind it.
I don't know how much of the work is the committee doing work and how much they would have to call on either the planning department or the consultants.
Ms. Russell?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the financial implications of this. If the answer is just to get volunteers in a room to discuss, then I don't have any recommendation at all. Go ahead. I think planning is a great idea. It's not until it comes before us and it costs something that I have more of an opinion. I think the town needs more planning in general on its commercial residential balance and what that should look like over the years, and it don't see that it does enough of it that I am aware of. So I'm not against planning, but I'm against putting money into re-examining this right now because I feel like it's in process. The Kelley's Corner project is going on right now. It would make more sense to me to kind of look at it after everything is settled and go, okay, well, now that we've got this, again, for the entire town of Acton, what does everything look like balance-wise, commercial versus residential? So if this doesn't cost us anything, I don't think I would say we don't need to take a position on it.
Ms. Gangali?
So is the steering committee still active or does it need to be reactivated?
It still exists, and they have a meeting planned, I think it's for April 12th, or I'm not sure of the exact date. Kristen Bouchard sent an invitation to them.
April 12th.
What?
April 12th, I'm on the committee.
Oh, okay, great, thanks.
And is there an end date for the committee right now? So I mean, if the committee is still active, it's within their purview to discuss whatever they'd like to discuss, correct? No, I'm just getting at, so why do we need a resolution to make this happen?
Well, I'll say from a personal point of view, I expressed interest in seeing it reactivated and talked about because I was seeing all the construction. I felt like we weren't doing the other half. We didn't have a town vision ongoing to help plan it. And so I came to citizens' concerns, to the planning board and to the select board, and I didn't feel like that went anywhere. I mean, I just expressed my opinion. So I am using the citizens' petition to bring it in front of the whole town to sort of make it a more conscious, talked about position. But you are right that it could just happen without it.
May I direct a question to Ms. Anderson?
Sure.
So is this one of the topics that comes up at steering committee, or is it a steering committee only dedicated to following the project as it stands right now?
I have not been a member for very long. I've only been a member for a few years. It had been going on for much longer than I've been on this committee. What we have done the entire time that I've been on it has been working on getting the project going. It was all post this 2016 project. There has been nothing else that has been part of our purview. I'm sure that with direction from the town management. The meetings are currently largely led by the planning department, the head of the planning department. I'm sure that with direction from the select board or the town management that the committee would happily move into this area, but it's not currently on the radar.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Noon.
Yes. So my recollection is that during the Acton 2020 process, this became the lead thing to come out of that. Yeah, it was a pretty comprehensive look at the town. 2020 was far in the future when they started. Now we're looking at it in the rearview mirror. And my shorthand recollection of how it all played out was that, yeah, because we couldn't get control of the properties, we decided on the one thing we could do is change the traffic pattern, improve the flow through Kelley's Corner. And there wasn't much more we could do with changing the character of the business and implementing the rest of the vision that, you're right, town meeting was very excited about. It just stalled. I'm wondering whether we need a broader look at this. We've had committees focusing on Kelley's Corner for years, and talking about walkable centers and walkable villages. And so, yeah, I live up in Nagog, and now one of the few walkable parts of town, the Nagog Mall, which, is easily walkable from Nagog Village and Avalon, and a few other places is basically going away. We're losing 3 restaurants, the dollar store, Dollar Tree, whatever it is, and another grocery store, and a few other businesses just like that. So while we were been concentrating on Kelley's Corner, trying to make it walkable, now we find out that one of the walkable areas we have in town is just going away. Now, it's commercially zoned, and, it's being taken over by an auto dealer. It's a commercial application. There's not much anyone can do about it. So I'm thinking maybe we need a broader look at the town, not just Kelley's Corner. Maybe we need another 2020, only this time it'll be 2040 or something like that.
Mr. Majors?
Yes, I think there are still opportunities to implement part of that plan at the Kelley's Corner intersection. I think if you look sort of away from the Kmart parcel and look at the rest of the area, I think if you envision from where the dental building is, that lower parking lot, starting there, going up, you would take that parcel, you would add to that Bank of America ATM, you get rid of that, all the way to the intersection, you remove Bueno and Sano across the street to the Kmart site, to where it would add something there, but you would have all the way from 27 down to almost the TD Bank, not the TD Bank, but the Northern Bank, as you could develop as like a West Acton Village type structure that would be a mix of commercial, residential, and retail. And it would be walkable, it would meet all your criteria. And I think you just have to get a sympathetic developer and maybe some sympathetic zoning that would allow a developer to do something like that, because, it's probably construction-wise not an ideal site, but it's doable. And I think that would, you need to take that leap and do something brave. And I think that could be one of the most important intersections in all of Acton. And if you could put residential, commercial, and retail right there, which you're golden. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I've got $10 in my pocket that says the moment that we're done with the Kelley's Corner project, that parcel is going to be developed or put up for sale. And I'll bet you that's what the current owner is waiting for, completion of that, which, as Mike pointed out, is going to really raise the value of that property and really raise the awareness of that property. So it sounds to me like the real question is zoning. What do we want zoned there? Sheer commercial, mixed use, overlay? What's it going to be? And I suspect that when the time comes for that to be developed, if the developer or an interested party in buying it thinks that mixed use is far more valuable to their pocketbook than, say, commercial only, they'll come to the town, we'll get a petition to go to town meeting, change the zoning at that time, and everybody kind of gets what works economically at that point in time. That's my only comment. I don't have any specific questions for you, Ms. Osman. I will allow public comment at this time. Tara, do you have?
Thank you. I have a lot of concerns about this. I think that you either are going to worry about future costs. If you don't worry about future costs, then this free article will turn into future costs. There are lots of housing grants awards, like you can go get free money from the state that would love to pour money into that corner. So you'll have a free PR firm, for example, like they did for the zoning last time. I feel like this calls for more town-wide zoning, because we still have no idea how much land is being lost every year. We have no idea what the plan is for water. Nice pictures and concepts and stuff, but I feel like this is yet another spot zoning project. Let's zone Clouder Mill, let's figure out what we want here, let's figure out, but we don't figure out what we want for the whole town. So I figured that that a master planning exercise is needed before we go engaging in hundreds of thousands. That's what it turns into, because next petition is going to be for this, and next the petition is going to be for that. And so support from this here effectively opens up a floodgate of more, and more. So I'm very concerned about overbuilding, as you know, and how much money of the town's planning, because they say they don't have enough time to tell me how much land is being lost. They don't have time to look at odd-shaped lots. They don't have time to do other things, but they have plenty of time to do, rezone to build. So I'd like you to think about how much time and how much money, FTE time, has gone into failed plans. Failed planning exercise that result in nothing except for dollars spent, and then plans that can come back later again to bite us. So I feel like what you want is you want a master plan, not yet more spot zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone, please, Tara. Thank you. Any other comments from the Finance Committee or questions for Ms. Osman? Ms. Osman, any further comments for the Finance Committee?
I don't.
Thank you so much for coming to see us.
Thanks.
Whose article is this? Would you like to make a motion?
Would anyone else like to make a motion? I'm undecided on where I stand relative to this purely financially without knowing what this would cost. I think it is an important thing to get a sense of the meeting, a sense of the town meeting about, but there are no numbers specifically associated with this.
Go ahead, Ms. Russell.
Okay, well.
I think Mr. Martin's just setting up for his presentation.
Oh, is he? I thought maybe he had a comment, and I was just
But-
curious what the select board thought about this particular article, but I don't have a question.
Article 47, non-binding resolution, Kelley's Corner Improvement Initiative. I vote to motion to take no action or no recommendation.
We have a motion and a second. The motion is for no recommendation on Article 47. Any more deliberation?
Yeah.
Mr. Cole?
I think we should make a recommendation or a not recommend on this, because I think it does have much wider implications. I think just saying we want to revisit Kelley's Corner brings back alive a plan that was voted down in 2016. I think we should vote against this, and in our 30-second spiel at town meeting, we should say we would much prefer a town-wide commercial versus residential review rather than going back to just reviewing this one particular plot of land. So I'm going to vote against the no recommendation, and I'm going to vote to not recommend, if we get that far.
I think this might be a good time for those of us on the committee that were not here in 2016 to maybe get a little bit more understanding on what that town meeting vote was. I mean, was it basically the idea that we would steer the owner of the property in some particular way to develop their property? Is that the gist of it?
We have no ability to steer an owner in any way, shape, or form. All we can do is vote the zoning. And so there was a quote unquote friendly developer, and I take objection to that terminology. There was a quote unquote friendly developer who came to the town and said, I have this beautiful plan where we're going to put commercial on the first floor, and we're going to put residentials on floors 2, 3, and 4. And I still remember to this day the numbers that he said. He said there are going to be 255 units of housing, and he said, and that'll get you between 55 and 75 students. That is not, those numbers alone, when you do basic running of, just skip the number of students, just because apparently they're a protected class, you're not allowed to say anything about them. But just take the fact that you went from 100% commercial to 75% floor area ratio residential. You've given away, you have changed the ratio of commercial to residential in this town. And every time you do that, it has bearing on water. It has bearing on the number of firefighters we need, the number of cops we need, whether or not we have to expand the sewer system into that area because of the sheer number of people that are going to be in that densely populated area. not to mention other things that you can't talk about. Thank God it failed. Thank God it failed.
I think that was a good explanation. Any more deliberation? So the motion on the floor is to make no recommendation.
I'm going to rescind my no recommendation.
Yeah, I'll rescind. Jason made a decent argument.
The second has been rescinded. The motion has been rescinded.
Correct.
Would you like to make a new motion?
You know, Jason did that.
All right, we have a motion to not recommend this article and a second. Any more deliberation? All those in favor to not recommend, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Okay, that was 47.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask for a 10-second indulgence?
Go ahead.
Christie, when you present our nay, would you please take into account that we said that we would love to see a townwide rather than just a Kelley's Corner only opinion? Thank you.
And I'll also add to that comment and say that, really the reason that I like to vote for the not recommendation is based on the fact that if there's anything I love, it's the town deciding something, right? More than a committee deciding. And I think the fact that a specific plan came to town meeting and failed and could have passed, I think that we need to allow the opportunity in the future for the same thing to happen again and let it win or fail on its own merits. So I think I like where we've gone with that. Mr. Martin is here to present on the firearm business zoning article. Before we start, Mr. Martin, I could use a break. Does anybody mind if we take 5 minutes?
Please.
All right, we will take a 5-minute recess. We will adjourn at 9:19. Sorry, 9:14. Okay. Thank you for the short recess. We are back in session. Mr. Wellinghoff had to leave for family obligations. We now have Mr. Martin here to talk about the firearm zoning article. Mr. Martin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for having me. So there have been a few inquiries about permitting firearms businesses in Acton, and we realized that we didn't have any particular zoning about firearms business, and so this bylaw is about having us have a say as to where they go and what the conditions are. When it's not about, outlawing firearms businesses, as you'll see, there are places for firearms businesses proposed in this change to our zoning bylaw. So right now, firearms businesses could be in these zoning districts depending on whether they just were retail establishments for firearms or whether they assembled firearms. If they assembled them, it's a manufacturing business. If they're both, it can only go in the powder mill district, which is where Stop and Shop is. I'm going to go through these a little quickly in the interest of your time. So I'm going to skip some slides. I'm not skipping anything that I won't talk about or whatever. If you want me to back up, I'm happy to do that. So this is a comparison with what some other towns do. There's a variety of buffers, designated zoning districts, other things that wherever the firearms business can be located. Ours uses the same techniques that are in, our proposal uses the same techniques that are in those other towns. And those techniques are location in specific districts, buffers from sensitive uses, and I'll talk about those, and having a special permit required, and also some issues for both operational and site safety, and I'll talk about those as well. So the proposal here is that a firearms business could not be located within 125 feet of a residence or within 500 feet of a sensitive use, and those sensitive uses are listed here: educational institutions, religious, childcare, municipal buildings, parks, playgrounds. This is what that map looks like. So it's a little crowded. So the things with the purple boundaries are the 125 feet around away from a residence, and the things with the orange boundaries are the 500 feet from a sensitive use. That points to two possible locations that are obvious places to put a firearms business. One is in the technology district, which is the one in the lower left of this map, the light blue area, and the other is in the small manufacturing district, which is the gray area on the right side of this map. And the gray area, not all of the possible places in the small manufacturing district could be used, but some of that area could be used. And also note that there's a shooting range already in that area. This just blows up the last map.
On the previous map, is that rotated?
Yes, it is,
Okay.
to get it in PowerPoint horizontal. Yeah, so north is right. These are the various regulations that would go along with this zoning. This zoning would allow only 2 firearms businesses in town be permitted at any point in time. So if there were 2 permits, it would not be possible to permit a 3. The permit could not be transferred to a different owner. There are various security things regarding surveillance cameras, hours of operation, approving the security plan by the police department, things like that. I want to highlight the one that's the third from the bottom here, and that's the subletting of space. This was the technique that the firearms businesses in Littleton used, right? Under one roof, they subletted the space to many individual vendors in order to be able to skirt the Massachusetts gun restrictions on the types of guns that could be sold. So each of these independent vendors sold parts, and one vendor would help you assemble the parts, even though the resultant gun would not be legal to sell in Massachusetts. So that's why this proposed zoning bylaw doesn't allow the subletting of space. It requires a special permit. There are a number of types of businesses and situations require special permits in town. This is one. The technology district and the small manufacturing district, 125-foot and 500-foot buffers. That's the summary. That's all. I can leave that up or take it down. That's the technology district. So that's, let me go back. I'll leave this one up. That's the one in the lower left of this diagram, the light blue area. So that's Knox Trail area. So you can see that the kind of obvious choices after we put the buffers in. The Knox Trail area is not within 125 foot of a residence or 500 feet of a sensitive location. And on the right or north end of town, only part of the small manufacturing district is obscured. Some spots would be available for. That's the gray on the right-hand side of this, within that red circle. You can see it's basically the small manufacturing are properties along Maiden Street in very, very North Acton. That's great. I don't know if you can you see my cursor? So there's a little bit of gray here, gray here, gray here. Those are all small manufacturing. Yes. And again, there is a shooting range already in that area. So, in summary, the reason to do this is to just give us a say if a firearms business wants to locate here. There was some concern when there were some inquiries to permit one that, they could take any open storefront and make a firearms business, and the other businesses in that, plaza or whatever might be concerned about business being driven away from their business. So, we wanted to be able to have, first of all, control where they could start and also be able to ask questions. That's why to call them out as a specific use.
All right, are we ready for questions? Questions for Mr. Martin? Mr. Majors?
Again, what problem is this trying to fix?
The problem that it's trying to fix is what I just said at the end, right? That we've received, I think, 4 inquiries about locating firearms businesses here. They could take any storefront because it's not explicitly called out in zoning, at least for a purely retail business, not an assembly business, but a purely retail business. So they could move into any of our open storefronts, and the concern would be for other businesses that are in that plaza, and whether it would be good for their business to have, or whether even if it's a perception issue, maybe people don't want to shop in that plaza anymore. This just gives us a chance to have a hearing, to be able to air people's concerns before we permit such a business.
Mr. Cole?
And I was going to add to the answer, but I decided I'm not going to after all.
Ms. Russell?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that there were upwards of 80 or so gun businesses in that area in Littleton, and it was one of the largest in the country. So, towns are now looking at that and realizing that they don't have zoning limits, and that is just a possible thing without them. So I think this is a smart step towards, just making sure that we have a say.
And in particular, Littleton changes its zoning particularly to get rid of that. And so now there is a rats from the ship possibility.
Other comments? Questions?
Question.
Okay.
Playing completely devil's advocate here. Why do we have to allow 2? Is it state law that we have to allow somebody?
So when we had the hearing at the select board meeting, one of the bigger complaints was there was only 1 in our original proposal. so we changed it to 2. So it's just to...
But why do we have to have any?
So town council has told us that if we didn't have any, it would not likely stand in court, right? And then they could, if it didn't stand in court, it might dismiss this whole section of the zoning bylaw, in which case we'd have no control again. And so we need to have a reasonable restrictions on businesses that are in, the interest of zoning. So this is trying to be reasonable, and we never had an intent to outlaw gun businesses, right? But, again, having some say as to where they go and various restrictions on them, like I said, showed on the second to last slide.
Thank you.
Mr. Newton.
Yeah, David, the draft warrant we have calls this a placeholder, and am I correct in understanding Select Board has not taken a vote? So my question is this the final text?
So I'm sorry about the fact that that's not in there. If the text says the 125-foot buffer, then it's the final text. And the reason I said that, so it's gone through a hearing at the Select Board and at the Planning Board. One of the pieces of feedback, we originally had a 100-foot buffer from residences, and one of the feedback from the at the Planning Board hearing was that is a little too small, so we increased that to 125 feet. Note that in Acton, you don't have to go much bigger than that to cover the whole town, right? So we have a lot of residences, and so...
It does have the 125.
Yep. Okay.
If it's the 125, then it's the final text.
Okay, so it's the final version.
Yeah, the Select Board voted to put it on the warrant. It's then, though it was slightly revised after the Planning Board's feedback, but pretty slight. And then I don't know whether the Select Board Chair is going to vote on it again.
That doesn't, I have this thing about making sure that's the final language in the warrant before we recommend.
Yes, if it says 125, it's the final language.
Ms. Anderson.
To be clear, we are not stopping anyone from buying guns. We are not interfering with anyone's right to bear arms. We are providing a legal place for them to do it. So we're not taking up any potentially constitutional issues here. We are just defining where we think are safe places to do that.
Yes, and again, council advised us that if we tried to outlaw all businesses, we would likely not be successful if challenged.
Is there any indication that buffer zones have been affected?
What zones?
Buffer zones.
So that is a little bit debatable, right? I mean, it's, I think some people look for cause and effect that, someone's going to go from a gun shop to a residence. I think it doesn't quite happen like that, but people, and this is what zoning is for, people don't want this kind of business in their areas that they pass by every day on their way to their house, right? They want to be a little bit in areas of the town that are appropriate for this kind of business. And that's the reason for the buffer.
I had a question, and now I can't remember it. Are there any other questions? Because I've lost mine, and I'm sure it was an important one. We have a member of the public who would like to speak.
Yes.
Go ahead, Tara.
I'm in favor of limiting everything. No, I am, though, because I feel like it defines on who you are by saying what you can't do. So pizza shops, nail salons, we got enough of them, car dealers, and so I hope that you look not only at limiting gun shops, but at limiting other stuff, too. Thank you.
Microphone, please. Thank you, Tara. Mr. Martin, what happens right now with people that have come to town looking to open gun shops? You said there were already inquiries. What's to stop them from taking out a lease and starting a business today?
Nothing, right? So the planning department will advise them on, they might come and ask for a permit somewhere, or maybe, I don't think anybody has taken the final step, but they might ask, can I do this here? And the planning board will answer with what our current zoning bylaw is. So one of the things that's helping us now a little bit is the fact that many gun shops both assemble and sell. And so they need to be in a zoning district that supports both retail and manufacturing, according to the way our zoning bylaw is written. Right now, that's the powder mill district, which may also not be appropriate for what we want, right? Because that's, if there's an empty storefront next to Stop and Shop, we may not want a gun shop next to Stop and Shop, right? So we want it in a little bit different area of town, right? But nothing is stopping them from doing it as long as they adhere to the current zoning law.
And what happens in the event that one or two or even 10 businesses come in and open shop tomorrow before we have a chance to pass any kind of zoning? What does that mean for our ability to affect this zoning thereafter? It would effectively be full because we'd already have at least 2 in town, correct?
Yes, I would think so, right? So if there were 2 established themselves within the next 2 months, then another one couldn't open under this zoning bylaw until one of those closed.
Okay, whose article is this? None of us. Okay. I will accept a motion at this time.
Motion to recommend. I move that we recommend.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to recommend Article 15 to amend the zoning bylaw for our firearms businesses. Any more deliberation? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. One. Okay, next item on the agenda is to talk about the Middlesex Retirement cost of living adjustment, the one time. I'd rather not do it next meeting because I brought everything I need for it tonight. And I think there's somebody sitting in the audience who's been waiting all night for us to talk about it. This is a good point.
I'm sorry, for the sake of everyone who can't hear me, I'm asking if we can postpone the Minuteman Middlesex Retirement COLA cost of living adjustment discussion until after we have completed voting warrant articles, because the warrant discussion has a deadline.
It's hard to argue with that logic. I'm willing to move on to warrant articles, so let's just start at the front of the book and work our way through as fast as we can.
Mr. Chairman, because I'd like to cross things off on my schedule, I'd like to propose that we move to recommend the consent articles 17, 18, 20 through 34. Correct, 2 and 3. Thank you.
17, 18, say those again, 22. 20224.
20234.
34.
And 2 and 3.
And 2 and 3. Do I have a second? Moved and seconded. All those,
Debate.
Debate, deliberation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Your microphone wasn't on, but Mr. Cole abstained. Okay, so that does the consent articles. So now going back to the beginning.
Now I feel like I'm accomplished something.
Article 1, we're going to defer because it's related to Article 11, which currently isn't printed. So we are going to, tonight, defer Article 1. And now we're going to go to Article 5, which we are also going to defer. We voted for, we voted for. We voted to recommend for. It was our first vote this evening. Okay, sorry, Article 5 gets a deferral. Article 6, Town Capital Infrastructure Design and Construction. This is also for the DPW, so this is going to get a defer. And Article 7, Acton Boxborough Regional School District Assessment. I will accept a motion on Article 7 for the assessment from the Acton Boxborough Regional School District.
And I'll move we recommend it.
And I assume that's as written, which I have verified the number. Let me just verify it one more time. 71. Yeah. Okay. Any discussion or deliberation? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
I have to abstain on the advice of town council.
Thank you. One abstention. Article 8, the Minuteman Regional School District Assessment for $2,674,259. I will accept a motion.
Go on yours.
I motion that we recommend this article. I think we talked it to death.
I agree. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
2 nays. Any abstentions? Thank you. Article 9 has been voted to recommend. Article 10 is sort of a placeholder. Article 11, so I'm going to just write here that we deferred this. Yes, you can ask about Article 10.
John or David, can you speak to Article 10? This is, I believe, the Conant land, open space. When I spoke with Dean about this at the end of last week, it hadn't made it far enough to even being there any concept of language. Is this pretty much what's going to happen? Should we be discussing it? Or should, I'm asking, sorry, it's late for me. I'm asking if this is effectively the finalized language without the summary.
So the language related to the acquisition of a conservation restriction, it's pretty close to what we're going to be asking for, and if it changes, it wouldn't be substantively. The big concept here is acquiring the land for the CR on the land for $1 million. It's my understanding that the CPC discussed it tonight. And this article is for the Finance Committee to consider whether it wants to recommend moving forward.
And the idea is that the CPC would be footing the $1 million bill. They'd put the money up for it.
To be funded from the open space set aside, yes, existing
Thank you.
money that's being contributed to also this year.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't like to get ahead of the CPC on this stuff. If they haven't voted it yet, I think we should wait.
I agree with you. I'd like to defer this.
My phone died, but I had a text message on it earlier that said they passed it, but let me see if...
All right, we might consider coming back to that at the end. Article 11 looks like a placeholder. Article 11 is the article that definitely will be deferred. Hopefully we will have some more information on that before we meet again. And Article 12, Who has Article 12? Mr. Majors, would you like to speak to this article?
Yeah, 2 years ago, the Building Clean Energy Bylaw home rule petition was passed by the town, but the legislation at the state did not grant it, that home rule petition. But what they did do was pass legislation that allowed it to happen for fossil fuels. And that was just a little bit of history. And this bylaw will create a new specialized stretch code that will change new construction in several ways. It will increase insulation and air sealing requirements for both new homes and major construction. It requires wiring to allow an electric car charging station in every new single-family home, and a higher percentage of commercial electric car charging readiness than is in what the normal code would require. Now, the specialized stretch code allows for 3 paths to compliance for new residential buildings. One is a zero energy pathway. It's where on-site renewable energy provides all needed energy. The second one would be an all-electric pathway, and the third is a mixed fuel pathway. And they have, in their article, they put a restriction on residences over 4,000 square feet. They're not allowed to use the mixed fuel pathway. It means anything, it's got to be all electricity. So obviously there's financial impacts to that, not to the town, but to the builders and so on, because it requires wiring to be sufficient for eventual transition to all electric, including solar power generation requirements, to mitigate near-term emissions with an exemption for shaded areas. If you happen to have a lot of trees, you probably can't have solar. So if you can't have solar, you don't need all those that special wiring. Commercial stretch code is similar but more complex. It includes a new language on the sides of commercial building, which they call cladding, and it allows for more paths to compliance and has compliance requirements coming in 2 phases. Well, basically, it part of the town of Acton is also part of a 10-community fossil fuel-free demonstration project, and all this zoning is in compliance with that. When they joined that 10-community fossil fuel demonstration project, this is part of the requirements that they have to do to comply with that. It's, just more restrictions on fossil fuels, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that seems to be the wave of the future. I don't think it's right, but that's what they want to do.
Questions for Mr. Majors? Ms. Russell.
Sorry, I don't have a question for Mr. Majors, but if the select board has actually discussed this, I was hoping to hear at least what their thoughts were, just because it's not listed whether they recommend it or not.
Spent 2 hours on it last week.
Hi, the select board voted to recommend both of these, but I just wanted to clarify the purposes of these two. Mr. Majors was really, and a lot of people do this, dealing with Articles 12 and 13 as a group. but they're really two separate things. So the first one is a forward-looking electrical code, right? It's so that new buildings and major revamps of existing buildings would use a forward-looking electrical code. I'll just give you a couple of examples. One is it would require an outlet in new garages where you could plug in a car charger for an electric car. It doesn't make sense anymore to build, you don't have to put in the charger. You need the wiring for the charger. Similarly, all new buildings would require the wiring to accommodate heat pumps, there, and not, so you wouldn't have to, if they put in the mixed fuel path, if they put in a gas heating system, then have to come back and put in a bigger panel in order to put in the heat pumps. So basically, it's a forward-looking electrical code. And then Article 13 is where we had done the home rule petition to ask the legislature, we asked the legislature for the ability to limit new fossil fuel construction, like putting natural gas pipes in a new street. And the legislature chose not to approve our home rule petition, and instead, as Mr. Major spoke about, passed this law involving 10 communities in the Commonwealth to be pilot communities to be able to control new fossil fuel infrastructure, like gas pipes down new streets. And so because we were one of the communities that had done a home rule petition, I think there were maybe 6 in the Commonwealth, that we are kind of first up, if you will, to if we want to accept the new law, which allowed 10 pilot communities to do this. And the law is a little different than our home rule petition, and so we passed a law last year that said, when they approve our home rule petition, we'll put this in place here, but they didn't approve our home rule petition exactly, so we have to do this kind of step again because the language of the law that the legislature passed is different than the law we asked them to pass.
Ms. Anderson.
David, I don't know if you or Mike are the better one to answer this. For the changes to the electricity to the house, is that saying that you need what I think of as effectively a larger pipe coming in? That you need more than, I think it's 120 volts is what we have to houses? Are you saying, I know that's not what we need right now, are you saying that someone would need that to handle a higher capacity draw? Or are you simply saying you just need an outlet in your garage?
So the outlet is just one piece of it. So I just wanted to give that as an example. I think you could probably still do this with 200 amp service, although I'm not absolutely positive of that. But I suspect you could still do this with 200 amp service. But it says that the wiring through the house has to be prepped to accommodate an all-electric home in the future, even if you're not doing an all-electric home now.
What would all electric be by that?
Well, it'd probably still be heat pumps. So if you choose, it gets a little bit complicated, but if you choose the mixed fuel pathway, you could still put in a gas boiler if that's what you want to do. But if it's a new house, it also has to be kind of prepped to be able to do heat pumps.
Because that's not necessarily requires different wiring. I could put a heat pump in my old house without needing.
Absolutely. I just put in heat pumps in my house last year. It required, because I didn't see way out, right? I had to actually update my panel twice, right? In this code, you would not have to do that. The panel would be all set to accommodate, and that means not only the amperage, but the number of slots, the wiring around the house, et cetera, would be done to accommodate an all-electric house.
I'm trying to understand the financial burden that we're putting on someone potentially. What I'm hearing is really you probably just need a bigger panel.
Yes, I believe that the overall burden is small. Doing the wire, as you're wiring a garage, doing one more wire for an electric car charger is not a huge thing for the electrician to do. Also, in new construction, an all-electric heat pump home costs less to construct than a traditionally heated home. Right now, the way things are with energy prices and things, there's slightly cheaper, this much cheaper to construct and this much cheaper, this much more expensive to run. So right now, construction is slightly cheaper, running is slightly more expensive.
What I'm hearing is this is not onerous for a developer. This isn't a deal breaker for a developer
It is
to
not.
say,
It
you
is-
need to put a bigger panel on.
It is not a deal breaker. So we have a policy, the select board has a policy right now to suggest to developers that they do this, and we've had developers in a couple of cases. We suggest when they come in for their permit review that, have you looked at, not using fossil fuels? And so because we asked them, we have nothing enforceable, but we ask them, they go off and do it, and they come back, they say, I switched because it's cheaper.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I think it is forward-looking, but it's also has a very narrow definition of energy, and I don't think they really understand where energy comes, especially with fossil fuels. What do you think produces the electricity? Where does that come from? It comes from coal mines, it comes from natural gas, things like that, and it just ignores all those factors and just looks at a little piece of the puzzle that affects their own community and not the world outside and where the sources of this energy. I just think it's hypocritical.
Any other comments? Questions?
Yeah.
Let me go Mr. Noon first.
I was just wondering, how are we defining a major renovation? Does this work?
I don't know if,
Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
just waiting.
Oh, sorry,
waiting to
I'm
be
sorry,
called on.
Mr. Murphy.
So actually, you
Go
can
ahead.
see it in the warrant article, and there are two different situations in 2.4 in the warrant article, case 1 and case 2. In one case, it's more than 75% increase in the floor area, and the other is 50% increase.
I was asking about 12, I'm sorry.
So 12, I think, does not have a specific thing for new construction. I'd have to go look to be sure. I'm not aware of it being with new construction. It works kind of like the current energy code, right? If you get, for example, if you put in a microwave today and you do an electrician, they have to put that on its own circuit. It's required now to put that. It didn't used to be. So if you have an old plug, you can plug it in as long as your circuit breaker doesn't blow, you're good. But if you get that change done now, the electrician has to adhere to the current energy code, which requires certain kinds of major appliances to be on their own circuit. And so there, I think this code applies like that. It only applies to work being done.
I was just looking at whatever it is, V3 Specialized Energy Code under bullet number 1. And it's just saying that mixed fuel pathway shall not be permitted for new construction and major renovations.
It also says that for item 2.
So I'm just wondering is it a percentage of value, and usually how it's defined in these things?
I don't know in the case of Article 12. I do know that the intent is that if you need to upgrade your heating system there, that you not put in another gas boiler.
I grasp the intent, Tim. I'm just trying to get to the particulars.
Sorry.
Yes, please, sir.
In terms of having to bring your residents up to current code, which, as you might imagine, is very important to my house. My recollection is that you need to do you need to be changing more than 30% of the structure. That it's based on area, not value.
I'm assuming that this refers to where it says major renovation, something somewhere else in the building code that this specifies back to. It's just not stated in this article. Other comments or questions? Tara?
I'm very much in favor of this. It's an easy, cheap, and passively cheap way to lower our carbon footprint. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tara.
Oh, thank you. Another way to lower carbon footprint.
I will say that every time we talk about going all electric, it sends chills down my spine because I grew up in the 70s and I remember the late 60s, all of the 70s and into the early 80s when every house where I lived in Colorado had baseboard electric heat. And from 1985 through the year 2000, homeowners paid a lot of money to rip that out and put in. So I like that this allows for some mixed pathway. It concerns me that residents over 4,000 square feet are not allowed the mixed fuel pathway. However, I can't say that I'm not an expert, but I think with modern solar technology, you can generate plenty of electricity on top of a 4,000 square foot house for a 4,000 square foot house.
If the trees allow.
Yeah. And so I'm really torn about this whole concept. I don't know about all of you. It's difficult for me to decide what's right in this case, but it scares me to think of going all electric and then having somebody come with a 30-06 and blow up one of our transformers in the nearby station, and then we're all out of heat. Ms. Anderson.
I discussed this with my plumber about trying to switch to air source heat pumps, and he pointed to that same thing from the 70s. He's worried about a similar repeat of the issue. Again, I would ask that we look at this from a financial standpoint, whether this is the right thing politically isn't the wrong word. Whether we think this is the right direction to go, I think we need to look at for our advisory role here, whether this is the right thing for the town in terms of creating a revenue stream, the taxes for us, whether this is going to put an undue burden on the development of affordable housing that we need, or is this somehow going to push us to the larger development that is potentially creating more taxable income with lower impact on bringing children in, just thinking about that more financial impact. What I heard from David and my understanding of this technology is that this is not putting a real burden on any sort of development in the current energy system. The move towards electric is the way to go. Your point about the transformer, we're in trouble if the electricity goes out, whatever your heating fuel is. My old oil burner in the old house wouldn't have run. My gas furnace now needs the electricity. I mean, the gas pumps even, if we had a long-term electrical outage, no one's heating their house for long unless you have a good fireplace. So we're going to be in all kinds of trouble.
That's an excellent point. Other comments? Mr. Majors?
Yeah, just imagine a typical nor'easter in the winter. It's a heavy, wet snow. It takes down tree branches. The tree branches take down the power lines. Your house now has no heat or lights. But, you're going to be cold.
I think I have a question that might help clarify my thinking, which is, in the event that I have a house that currently has, say, 2 gas fireplaces in it, and I want to renovate my house, under this code, am I required to rip out those 2 gas fireplaces, or can I leave them? Do you know the answer,
It
Mr.
depends on
Martin?
how much you're renovating. So that the Article 13 doesn't apply. Article 12 would apply if it's a major renovation. And I don't think that the electrical code would require you to remove your gas fireplaces. I won't absolutely swear to that, but I would really doubt that that's the case.
Thank you. I think for me personally, to want to get on board with these 100%, I think that's a minimum that I would want to see, is that if someone does a major renovation, lives with all these other changes, puts in the electric pathways that they need to put in, and as long as they're not required by code to rip out a system they already have existing, then I'm okay with this.
You're going to be required to rip out your gas boiler and put in an electric. You're going to be required to pull out your gas forced hot air and put in a heat pump. This is definitely restrictive. This is, I think there's two parts to this. The forward-looking part from a financial perspective does not cost us anything. Any good builder is going to want to build to the latest and greatest, and if not overbuild, because it's way cheaper to throw an extra wire in the wall before you put up the sheetrock than to have to do it after the fact. So I think this is virtue signaling. This is our way of saying, we want you to be better, but people are going to be better anyway. Meanwhile, it comes with restrictions. And so I think the economic cost is we will be broadcasting to everyone that we have decided to, at the cost of individual decision-making capabilities, we want our virtue signal that we're as clean as we can possibly be, and so we're going to start restricting people. I think that's going to have an impact on our ability to, on how we present ourselves to the rest of the world. Furthermore, I don't think this makes one iota of difference in the grand scheme of things when there are 7 billion people on Earth. The actions of 25,000 Actonians is going to make a bit of difference, and I do not like having handcuffs put on me for nothing. So I will be voting against this, just on general principle.
As I said, I'm wishy-washy, and I'll counter your point and say it has to start somewhere. You see, I'm wishy-washy.
Okay, fine, it has to start somewhere. Then don't let the invisible hand say, you want to make sure that you put in all the electrical that you possibly can. Your house will be more attractive if you've got a Tesla charger in the driveway. Don't demand it. And don't start saying what you're going to force people to lose if they choose to happen to stay living in Acton. It has to start somewhere. It doesn't have to start with me.
Mr. Nim.
In the equivalent of calling a question, I would say, could somebody make a motion?
Ms. Russell, did you have comments?
No, I mean, I was just going to say that for me, these are town meeting articles that I have an opinion on that are, might be separate than my finance committee, vote. Like at a town meeting, I'm telling you I'm going to vote for these. But what is the financial implication is really the only thing that I try to look at when I'm approaching these articles here in this meeting. And I'm not sure I see a financial implication that is negative. So, I would lean towards making no recommendation or recommending.
Thank you. That was a very thoughtful comment. Mr. Majors, do you care to make a motion?
I move that we make no recommendation.
More discussion? Really? No more discussion? All those in favor of making no recommendation, and this is going to be for, are we voting Article 12?
12 and 13.
Just Article 12.
Okay.
Just Article 12.
Can I make a comment there?
Yes, you may.
So I think if, similar to the other articles that we voted to have no recommendation on, I think at town meeting we need to say why we're not recommending. Okay?
That's fair.
Yeah, because it's clearly it's a discussion
Why we
point.
are making no recommendation, not that we are not recommending.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. More deliberation, no more deliberation. All those in favor of making no recommendation for Article 12, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right. So we voted no recommendation.
Mike, do you have a similar thought about Article 13?
Mr. Majors, would you like to make a motion on Article 13?
Article 13, I recommend that we make no recommendation on Article 13.
Was that a second from Mr. Borden? So we have pardon me. We have a motion to make no recommendation for Article 13. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. No recommendation.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn the rest of this meeting and push it to a future meeting. Maybe next Tuesday.
I personally disagree. I've had my break. I can go for another 3 hours.
Mr. Chair, we do.
I heard a motion. I don't.
We do need to.
Now I have a motion and a second.
We do need to meet again.
Point of order, it's
That's-
not debatable.
That's true.
I hope I'm trying to debate.
No, just saying.
It's been moved and seconded.
It's been moved and seconded.
We can't have any other conversations until we take a vote.
So the motion on the floor is to adjourn? And it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say
That's
nay.
Nay.
Nay. Is that 3 nays?
Oh, no.
Okay, show, doesn't matter. Do shake it, show.
And any abstentions? Thank you, we are adjourned. That's okay. That's quite all right.
Roland, were you the second?